Hello, this is Garrett Eckert with Simple Ministries. Please visit the website at simpleministries.org. And today we'll be reviewing a video of a news/commentary of a woman who has blinded herself because this is how she feels that she should be. And we're going to see how this ties in with the transgendered issue, although it never seems to come to mind to the people talking about it here, even though they are all three on board with the very same reason for accepting or approving of transgender people. They condemn this woman. So let's let the cherry picking begin.
A woman in North Carolina purposely blinded herself by using drain cleaner because she has a mental illness that's referred to as body integrity identity disorder. Now, Barcroft Media did an interview with her, a very short doc about her situation. Take a look at this and we'll fill in the blanks for you.
She suffers from a rare condition called body integrity identity disorder, which led her to deliberately take her own side.
When there's nobody around you that feels the same way, you start to think that you're just very crazy. I don't think I'm crazy. I think I have a disorder.
So that's kind of interesting there. Let me just actually move this up here. That's better. That if she doesn't have anybody to affirm her, then she feels crazy. She does accept that she has a disorder. Many trans people would reject that, although they have kind of a love-hate relationship with that terminology, because it's because of the diagnosis of a disorder that they have a medical condition that insurance and the government will pay for the surgeries that they want. So on one hand, they don't want to be called disordered or that they have a disorder, but on the other hand, they want this to be covered by insurance or government health care, because if it's not a disorder, then it's just cosmetic surgery, and the government and the private health care plans don't cover cosmetic surgery. So there's a little bit of a difference here, but it's really kind of the same, because even though trans people don't want to admit it, they actually want that classification for insurance benefits.
BIID means that you have a need to be disabled in some way. In my case...
And so she terms it as disabled, but I'm sure other people with this condition would say, no, this is simply who I am and who I am supposed to be. She sort of embraces the idea of disabled and disordered, although I'm sure there's others that are cringing at the way she is characterizing this. Along with the transgender folks, they would cringe that some transgender people would consider themselves having a disorder, or that this is disabling them in some way, although it is when they have surgery on their reproductive systems that disables it from functioning in that way they are disabling themselves.
It was a need to go blind.
Okay, so I hadn't heard of this disorder before. I looked into it further, and the people...
And that's no surprise. I've heard of this disorder for a long time because of the comparison made to the exact same logical reasons for affirming transgender people would also apply to these folks as well. But a lot of times, and these are all liberal folks, they never bother to look at what the other side is saying to see if their thoughts are actually true and consistent.
People who suffer from this issue genuinely believe that they should have been born with this disability. So some people will remove limbs, they will take really extreme measures. In her case, she used the drain cleaner. She waited about 30 minutes to ensure that she was blind before calling the hospital, or going to the hospital, I should say. She goes to the hospital, and she said that she felt euphoria. She felt extremely happy when she realized that she had blinded herself permanently.
And this is something that I've heard from trans people as well, that after their surgeries, that they're just elated at what they've done. Very similar.
But then she noticed that she could see a little bit, and then she just took even more extreme measures to ensure that she was completely blind.
Yay. I don't know. To me, it sounds crazy.
Well,
So on one hand, it sounds crazy because of the modification or what she wants to do, but then again, if it's a trans person, it's not only acceptable, but it's supposed to be celebrated, and if you are not on board with it, he would consider you crazy.
Well, she has a mental health issue.
Yeah. But what's amazing in that story is her psychologist poured the cleaning solution in her eyes.
Yes.
I mean, why not try and cure the disorder? Why?
And this is something this man may not realize about mental health professionals, but they have a concept of, are you feeling some type of anguish or anxiety over your condition? And as long as that is relieved, or relieved more so than holding on to what reality is, then they actually approve of you doing it. So when it comes to transgender persons, our psychologists and psychiatrists saying, oh, you really should have been a woman, or you should have been the opposite gender, what you actually are. No, actually what oftentimes they're saying is, well, if we got two choices, we can either try to have you realize that your gender matches your body, or we can do a lot of surgery on you and hormones and other therapy to have you change. And oftentimes, because they don't know how to help somebody come to terms with who they were born as, they opt for the second option. And so, because they feel that is better for their mental health. And this is just the way psychologists and psychiatrists think. So this actually is in line with the way that they practice their profession.
Be like, you know what? I know you want it. Let's open up under the kitchen sink and get something out right now. I mean,
and that's kind of what they do with transgender people. That's what they want, and we're going to go ahead and grant it for them.
That guy should be held accountable.
I agree.
I do
okay.
agree.
So there are a lot of interesting things at play here, right? Because my consistent thought process on a person's body is, it's your body. You should be able to do whatever you want to do with it, right? Even if you're harming your body.
Not really, because if you were to ask her, should people be able to prostitute themselves? Well, she may say no, she may say yes, but if it came down to one of her family members, or if she had children, and hey, you'd be like, no, they shouldn't be able to do that to themselves. And so there are instances, and here's an instance. Well, let's hear what else she has to say about this.
Again, I don't think it's the government's place to get involved and tell you, these are the drugs that you're not allowed to do, these are the things that you're not allowed to do, this is the type of sex you're not allowed to have. I hate that. At the same time, yes, I wish that there was more help for her so she didn't actually do this. And unfortunately, I don't know if it's unfortunate, but she's happy with her decision. She's happy with the way she's living.
That's right. And a lot of transgender people are happy with their decisions too, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's right.
Living her life right now. It's insane.
And that's why. Because we should not promote and encourage people to do things that are insane, even if it makes them happy, and happy for a time. And with transgender people, yes, some people are very happy with it, but there's a lot of transgendered regret. The first medical center in the U.S. to do these type of surgery, it's at Johns Hopkins. Back in the 70s, in the 80s I believe it was, they stopped doing it because they would go back and see how people were doing after the surgeries, and they found that they weren't really, as a whole, doing any better mentally than those that never had the surgeries. And so they had to say to themselves, well, why are we doing surgeries on perfectly fine body parts, and it's not even giving people any really different mental health result? And so therefore, at Johns Hopkins, they stopped.
And also, she talked about how she felt this way since she was a little girl. Her mom had told her, don't look into the sun, or don't look at the sun, because if you do, you'll go blind. And she said she would spend hours upon hours just staring at the sun, hoping that she'd go blind.
And that's what we hear all the time. If you feel like you're transgendered since you were a little child, that must be the way you ought to be. And yet these folks here are saying, no, this isn't necessarily the way this lady ought to be. She should have gotten treatment to make her realize it's okay to see. Which, whether it be this lady or anyone else, why don't they say, okay, my brain's telling me that this is the way I was supposed to be. I'm supposed to be the opposite gender than I really am. I'm really supposed to be blind. Why don't they just say to themselves, hey, what's wrong with being a man or being a woman or being able to see? I mean, there are blind people out there that would literally give their right eye, pun intended, if they could see with their left. I mean, why didn't she say, hey, maybe I feel like I ought to be blind, but isn't it a great thing that I can see? I know it doesn't work. As she said, they have a mental health issue, and logic and reason are not going to win out unless they got some good help to help them realize that they need help in the mind and not to modify their bodies.
So it started when she was a kid.
It's amazing she didn't go blind from staring.
I know, that's kind of incredible.
I got it. It's a terrible thing, and it's a serious thing, and it needs to be taken seriously. You can't have there's no real psychologist force.
As already explained, yes, that is actually how they practice psychology and psychiatry. All of them, of course not all of them. They're not all in lockstep. But as far as what the associations are saying is how you treat somebody, if they have a mental disorder, and I mean, I'll give a little bit of liberty to mental health professionals. It's very difficult to help folks with their mental issues. It's not that biological issues are easy, but it's easier to help people with their biological problems than their mental problems. But just as with biology, the doctors, when they can't come up with a good solution to help heal somebody, they don't just give up and say, well, let's just affirm the person's illness. It's scientifically, the scientific thing to do would be to strive forward and try to come up with treatments to heal people. Unfortunately, the mental health organizations, they are doing the opposite of science. They're giving up and just saying, well, this is how these people be. We can't help them, and so it's just better off that we just affirm their disorder than try to help them get over it.
Drain cleaner in a patient's eyes.
The guy should lose his license.
Yeah,
if he had one.
Yeah, and probably go to prison.
Yeah,
I mean you can't do that, even if that's what she wants. You can't do that. That's I mean, I guess.
And you're exactly right. Even if that is what they want, we should not encourage the medical professions to harm people, whether it be biologically or mentally.
I guess if you're a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, meaning you're not an MD, you don't have to take the Hippocratic Oath, but you did harm. I got it.
Yeah.
You got to keep treating her. Make her come back the next day. I don't know, and I get it.
And I agree. She should keep on being treated, and the transgender people should continue to be treated until they can get their minds to match with the reality of their bodies. So just some things to think about there on this issue to help people. If you encounter this is a good thing to bring up. How about people with this body identity disorder that have other issues in which outside of gender? And in the comments of this video, what was expressed was they didn't really have, all the arguments given for transgender were not actually contradicted. It said the main difference here was that blindness really disables a person from working, and then they have to go on disability with the government, and they're a real drain on society. Whereas with transgender people, they're still able to work for the most part. And so, of course, that isn't necessarily so. Blind people can still work. And what about, if that's the case, if the goal is that people will not be a drain on society, then okay, since we have government, we're working on having full government health care, and because these procedures for transgender folks are expensive, does that mean that we should eliminate that from the system? Or do they feel wrong when it's happened in California in the correctional facilities out there that they now have to provide transgendered services, hormones, maybe even sex changes to people? In the military, the same thing. That's causing taxpayers' money. Do these same people think that that is wrong and that should not happen? And even if they pay for it themselves 100%, then later on, now that they've disabled their reproductive systems, let's say a woman wants to get pregnant, but her spouse has transitioned into a woman too, he can now not impregnate. Now who's going to pay to go to the sperm bank to help get her pregnant? And regardless, as this man just said, it's still harming somebody. As it was said earlier by the lady there, it's still insane and it should not be promoted. So thanks for watching. Look for more resources at simpleministries.org.